Welcome, everyone. I want to welcome you to one of our first webinars for the Summer Professional Development Program, Designing Effective Gradebooks. My name is Chad Harris. I am an instructional designer here at the Academic Technology Center. And also joining us is Jennifer Lares. She's going to be helping me with the chats. If any of you have any questions as we go, I want to keep this fairly informal. So please feel free to interrupt if I'm not clear about something, if I'm going too quickly. All right, and you can just raise your hand or you can post your question right in the chat, and Jennifer will do her best to answer your questions as they come along. And we will be recording this session, so you can have access to it if you miss any of it. And also there's an evaluation survey at the end that we need you to fill out so that we can note that you have taken the course, you can get credit for it. You don't have to answer every single question, but we really value your feedback on these sessions to help us do better. Okay. All right, I think that's it. I'm going to go right into it. I am sharing my screen, right? Just making sure.
Yes, you are sharing.
Good. All right. So here are the learning outcomes. I'm not going to be reading these off the slide. I just wanted to say a few things about what I'm going to be doing in about the next half hour, 40 minutes. Most of you already have your own grading system. I'm doing this webinar on the assumption that you're all experienced teachers. Some of you may be teaching online pretty regularly. And so, this is designed for that. This is really just basic techniques for making your own grading system better. Leveraging some of the tools in Beachboard can help you initially setting up your course or converting your course, and makes creating your course and designing it, making it better, much easier. So this is mostly going to be about workflow in Beachboard, doing certain things first that make your design tasks easier. Okay, and these techniques will give you more flexibility. Designing gradebooks is not unique to online. As experienced teachers, we all know the pain of having to have a decent gradebook, hopefully by the beginning of the course. All right, and this has been a challenge for all instructors. Most of us aren't really trained on this unless you come from a school of education. If you're like me, then you began your teaching career with not a lot of instruction on gradebooks, and you just kind of came up with your own system. My field is in communication. I've been teaching online since 2003, designing my own courses online, and also helping other instructors and faculty design their courses and convert them to online. I've been doing that since about 2006. So most of this is based on my own experiences as a teacher, as well as good design principles and also what we know about Beachboard and the tools that are available. Okay. So again, most of us aren't trained, but a lot of us have, figured out our own system. If you've discovered Excel, you were lucky to figure out how to make some, good formulas for having weighted scoring. Another main point I want to make in this talk today is, to have weighted scoring in your gradebooks it's going to make it much easier to communicate how students are doing and so on. But I'll get more on that and explain more of that as we go along. My spreadsheets before I started using a learning management system were usually fairly simple. I had some formulas. I figured out how to do weighted scoring with them and writing those formulas. But I switched over to using the gradebook and the LMS for all my courses. Currently, I teach at a community college level, and I have a face-to-face course that I teach every fall. I do all my grading in the learning management system. They use Canvas. I use the Canvas gradebook for all my grading. I have students log into Canvas, even though it's a fully face-to-face course. They get their grades there. They can see how they're doing throughout the course. I use weighted scoring and have a running total. So at any time, halfway through the course or whatever, they can see how they're doing based on what they've turned in and what I've scored so far. So I use the LMS for all of my scoring now. And this makes it more accessible and transparent for students. It's also really good for QM reviews. Quality Matters really likes to have well set up gradebooks with grading categories and nice descriptions for what each of those categories mean. Okay, so if you set up your gradebook right and do it at the beginning, okay, Beachboard can really do a lot of these gradebook calculations for you and make your life a lot easier, because all the formulas are built in to the LMS. all right? And you don't have to tweak and do a lot of math once you have it set up, okay? The best thing to do is to start with a good grading breakdown based on categories. Most of you have already done this and you have this on your syllabus and you have descriptions for, why students are doing discussions, why students do quizzes, assignments, any other grading categories that you have, and you group assignments within those categories. If you haven't done that, I suggest this is a really good way to start your grading in the LMS, because setting up these as weighted categories in the LMS gives you a lot of flexibility for being able to add assignments without having to redo the math in your grade books, and being able to communicate that instantly to students and have it be very transparent and accessible. So I'm starting with this concept of having a very precise grading breakdown on basic categories already established, with scores that add up to 100%. Okay, that's the best way to start. And I'm going to go out now and go right into our LMS and show you. So here's a grade book that I've set up in my development course that has a weighted column. Okay, and I'm going to start off from scratch. So you can use these techniques whether or not you're starting from scratch, you've never worked in an LMS, or you're just starting to build a brand new course, or like most of you probably have already been teaching in the LMS, who have a course in here. You can do this at any point. You can restructure this gradebook to make it easier to use at any point. But I'm going to start with this setup wizard. The setup wizard is really nothing fancy. It's just guides you through all of the settings that are in here. So I'm just starting here because starting with this allows you to go through the basic steps of setting up the gradebook in sequence without having to do a lot of poking around. So the first thing I do when I go to set up a gradebook, and again, this could be a completely blank gradebook, or you can have this gradebook, you can have all kinds of stuff in here already. As I start, I want to choose weighted scoring. A lot of you have set up your gradebooks with points, and that's fine. And you've probably figured out a system where you add up the points to a nice round number so students can sort of see the logic of your grading scheme. Okay, that's fine. I think it's a lot easier to have weighted categories because it gives you a little bit more flexibility again, and students are able to see a running total and see how they're doing throughout the course without having to do their own math. Right, and you'll see how the logic of this as I go along. But I always choose weighted scoring. I'm going to go through the rest of these kind of quickly. There are a couple other good YouTube videos that walk through this in more detail if you want to see that. But most of the stuff I just use the defaults. I always choose calculated final grade. I don't like to choose adjusted final grade. I believe that in some courses that are assigned, this ends up being the default. If it is, I suggest going to calculated final grade, because that way Blackboard or Beachboard does the math for you, and you don't have to do any kind of manual grading at all. I like that. I always choose drop ungraded items because this came up in discussion in our last seminar. A lot of instructors like to put zeros in the gradebook for students who haven't turned in their work. And that's fine. That's you're essentially using the gradebook to communicate to students that they need to complete. But I always choose drop ungraded items so that students can see a running total as they're going throughout the class. So that allows them to see how they're doing at any given time, and it won't count assignments they haven't turned in yet. This is really a matter of preference in terms of your teaching style. Default organization scheme, that's all pretty self-explanatory. I usually choose the default there, default decimal places, and most of these are what the students see. I always, I try to be as transparent as possible. I keep the defaults there, and then it's basically done. I click finish. So if I go to my gradebook, now I have this gradebook. This is the weighted column. You notice these are all the raw scores for my assignments. These columns, this category is adding up all the scores from everything that's under it, indented. Okay, so these are all individual assignments. These are the categories, and I'll show you how to set up these categories in a minute. Notice how these categories match my grading breakdown. 22% for discussions, 26% for quizzes, and so on. Okay, those you see here. and they all add up to 100. And what Beachboard is doing is it's calculating this for you. It's evenly distributing these across within that category and doing that math for you and weighting those scores for you. So you can actually add assignments to this, and Beachboard will do the math for you on the back end. Okay, if I wanted to change a score for an assignment, say if I go to test assignment and I change the score to something like, I don't know, 157, something random. Okay, I'm going to make an argument for always using 100-point scales, but I'll get to that in a minute. If I change that, that score is still going to be figured in as 25% of that category. Okay, you see how that works? Now, just for a second, let's go to a grade book that doesn't have weighted scoring. This is how a lot of you have set up your grade books. You don't have that weighted column. Okay, you have scores that add up. This is a kind of a messy one because I wanted to make a point about this, but a lot of you have figured out that, you know, maybe having 1,000 points in your course makes it all nice and round. And then you have to have, you know, all of your assignments add up to that 1,000 points. Okay, that's fine. That's a good grading book. That's a good grading scheme, but it doesn't allow you a lot of flexibility to, one, add assignments when you want to without having to redo the math and redo all that scoring calculation. Also, when students go in to see their scores, they may know they'll have to do the math themselves as well. So if they want to see how they're doing, say in week 5, they'll have to count the number of assignments they've turned in and do that math on the back end. Whereas if you have weighted scoring, they can see how they're doing. It'll show up in their final calculated score as simply a percentage of what they've done. So that it just it allows you, again, more flexibility with adding assignments and more transparency for the students to see how they're doing. Okay, so going back to this gradebook that I've set up with weights. Okay, so here's my course. I have all these assignments. So what I would suggest is doing all this first. This is you know, important for workflow. This is going to make your life a lot easier. Even if you already have a course in the LMS and you're starting a new term, go and set up your gradebook and make sure that it's everything is logical in here. A lot of instructors, and I've done this myself, you'll wait to do this last, and then it can be really messy. But if you set up all these categories, even without any assignments in them yet, you set up your grading categories based on your grading scheme, then it makes it a lot easier going forward to then just go in and start adding those assignments. So if I go, say, if I go to my Dropbox, I already have some in here. I want to add another one. I want to add another assignment. And I want it to figure into that 40% for all the assignments in the course, or with 40% of their grade. I want to add a new assignment. So I'm going to call that, let's call that test submission X. Okay. So I go with all these settings. One thing I want to point out, and this can be a little bit of a pain point for some instructors, you see this has a category here. This is a category for organizing your Dropbox. These are not the same as the grading categories that I just showed you. It's the same for quizzes and discussions. They all have a way within those tools to categorize your assignments, discussions, or whatever, but they don't work like grading categories. Grading categories you can weight and do calculations with. So that's a little bit confusing. Other LMSs don't share those terms throughout, you know, different aspects of the course, but that could be a little bit confusing. So ignore these categories in here for now. We're only worried about grading item categories for now. Okay, so I'm not categorizing this other stuff yet. Okay, so then you choose a score. Now, I always like to grade on 100-point scales. And if you have weighted scoring, if your gradebook is set up for weighted scoring, you can grade all your assignments on a 100-point scale. Now that's up to you. That you know, if you have weighted columns, you can actually score your assignments whatever, because it's going to weight those anyway and do those calculations. But I always use 100-point scales because it makes everything very easy. Makes everything very easy to see. When you have a fully constructed gradebook, you can easily see discrepancies where things aren't adding up if you're using 100-point scales. And then it's also very easy for the students to see how their scores add up. But you don't necessarily have to do this, but this is a strong recommendation from an experienced instructor. 100-point scales are really great to work with. Okay, now another pain point that you've noticed if you're teaching in Beachboard is that you can actually have, see, I'm setting up a new Dropbox assignment right now, but there's no grading item yet. And Beachboard does not automatically create that new grading item, at least not in the old experience. The new experience, I think, does do that. But you want to make sure that you have a grade item associated with this Dropbox item. And this is where you go in to choose your categories, right? And I'm going to show you a couple other things. Another thing that can be a pain point for instructors is that the grade item can be a different name than the Dropbox. You can title it differently. Okay, I like to title them the same so that I'm not confused later on when I'm trying to fix my grade book and I don't see things that match up. I'll always know that this grade item is associated with test submission X. It can be different though, and often instructors will make different grading items for their Dropboxes and name them different, and then 3 months later they get confused. It's easily done. Here are the categories. Here are all those grading categories that I made. Okay, since this is going to be an assignment, I'm going to put that in here. Here's another interesting part of Beachboard. This is an interesting aspect of D2L, which is what Beachboard is that the points can also be different. You notice I said the score out of 100 for this assignment, but the grading item defaults to 10. Why does it do that? Well, that's just how D2L was set up. It was set up so that you could have some flexibility with connecting grade items with your Dropbox items and so on, and have different scoring. But you always want these scores to be the same. Otherwise, what Beachboard will do is it'll recalculate the score. So if a student gets an 80, it'll recalculate it as an 8. And you don't want it to do that. We get a lot of instructors that come into virtual support and they can't understand why the scores on their grade book don't match the scores in the assignments. Well, this is often why, because the points don't match. And in other LMSs, you can't actually do that. There's more of a connection there. But D2L allows you to have these scores differently. But anyway, so I set that up. Notice how the weight changed. These were originally 25. Now they're 20 because I'm adding a 5th assignment. It's evenly distributing those across this category. Okay, so if I save that, save and close, I now have a test submission X that I can deploy wherever. If I go to my grades, I open up a separate grading tab to my grade book, you'll see that it's been added. It's redone the weights. It's done them for me, okay? I don't have to redo any of that math. I can add more assignments. I can add another quiz, and you do that the same way. So if I go to quizzes, and the same works for quizzes and discussions. When you set up a new quiz, I'm going to call it test quiz Y. Don't worry about quiz categories. That's a quiz category, not a grading item category. The grading items are going to be an assessment. So once I name that quiz, I can go to assessment without ever even putting any questions in the quiz yet. I want to go here and make sure that it's associated with a grading item. Now, what happens if I don't do that? Say if I don't make it a grading item, I'm just going to save it. Now I have 2 quizzes, X and Y. But if I go to my grade book, I have to reload that. There's no quizzes in the grade book because I didn't associate it with the grade item. So those scores, the LMS will record all the scores, but there's no grading item to record them to. So again, that's another pain point, to make sure all your assignments are associated with the grading item with the same name, okay? Anyway, so back to the main point of this. So what I'm going to do now, so that's now what I've done as I've set up a port with weighted scoring, and I've started from scratch using the setup wizard. But most of you already have courses set up. Okay, you have a course in the LMS. You've been using it. You've been grading it. You have a whole bunch of assignments. They add up to a total score. You've been doing fine, but you get lots of questions from students about how they're doing, why don't these scores add up, or whatever. You're doing a lot of math when you're scoring. It's very easy to convert this to weighted categories and clean it up and make it much easier to use. And I'm going to show you how quickly you can do that right now. So I have all these items. They have different scores. Some of them are on 100-point scales, which I like. Some of them aren't. Doesn't matter. When you switch to weighted scoring, you're going to be weighting these anyway, right? So to do that, I went to Setup Wizard first. But since I know exactly what I'm doing, I'm just going to go straight to settings, go to calculation options. Here's that same page that I saw on the wizard. Okay, right now it's set up for points. I'm going to just hit weighted. Simple as that. Save it. It's going to make sure I want to do that. Now I have a weighted column, but they don't add up to 100. It's a little wonky. These need to, the weighted column needs to add up to 100% because it's the, you're figuring out percentages of the total score for the course. It's a statistic, right? So the reason that doesn't add up is because I actually haven't created the categories yet. I need to create my categories based on my grading breakdown. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly do this. I'm going to do this all right in front of you just to show you that you can do this in like 5 minutes, okay? Or I don't have much longer to go. We're going to get done early. So I'm going to do this for you right now. And you can watch. So first of all, you create new categories here. You create individual grading items categories here. I need one for discussions. The weight defaults to 10 for some reason, not sure why. But I know that I want a discussion. For all my discussions, I want them weighted as 22% of the grade. So I've changed this to 22%. I don't know why this defaults to manually assign weight, but you always want to change it to distribute weight evenly if you don't want to do any math. Okay, that's the way that you allow Beachboard to do the math for you, by having it do the calculations and distributing evenly. Okay, these other options we can go over if you have questions about them. It's a little bit more, advanced stuff. I'm trying to keep it simple for this webinar, but we can go into that if you have any questions about that. Okay, so always choose weight evenly across all items, and I'm done. So it's created this category down here. I haven't put anything in it yet, but I want to create all my categories first and make sure they add up to 100. So I need another category for assignments. I know that I want that to be 40% of their grade and distribute evenly across the category. Okay. I have a final exam that I want worth 12%. That one exam I want to be worth 12% of their grade. So I'm going to create a category just for the final exam. I can put other exams in this if I want, no problem. And then I can just change the name to exams. The weighted scoring allows you that kind of flexibility to change that really quickly. Manually distribute evenly, although I don't really need to do that. I'm not putting any other item into this category. So it's going to default to 100%. And I need one more for quizzes. Quizzes are worth 26%. Distribute evenly. Done. Okay, so now I have these 4 categories. They still don't add up because I haven't put, it's calculating these weights separately because I haven't put these in. These were set manually before. So I want to assign these, and you can do this really quickly. I'm going to do the assignments first. I'm going to put the assignments into their assignment category. And all I do is go to edit. Now, when I go down to grading, underneath grading, I'm going to see, it's all that. But up here, I'll have this grading item category, and here's all my categories that I just created. Okay, so that's assignments, 40%. So the only assignment in there, so it automatically weights it at 100. Okay. There it is. The assignment is in its weighted category. Currently, it's 100% of that category because it's the only assignment in there. So I'm going to put my other assignments. That's 77 points. I can keep it there if I want. I like 100-point scales, but I'm just going to keep it there. But now the weight's 50. Each board's doing that for you. Okay. One more assignment. I did 3 assignments because I wanted you to show you how it deals with odd numbers of assignments in terms of weight. I don't need to change the max points, but I do want to assign this to the assignment category. Now look at the weight, because it's an odd number. It's distributing 3 items across 100%. So 33.3, but you don't have to do that math. It's doing it for you. Okay, and then you can add more. So all the assignments now are under the assignments category. I'm going to quickly do this now for the discussions, just to show you how quickly I can actually get this done. That goes to discussions. Put that in its discussion category. I have my final exam. It's 12% of the weight, but it's going to add that to the final weight. I don't want it to do that. I want it to be worth 12% of 100. So I'm going to put this in its category that I made just for it. Final exam. Doesn't matter how many points the final exam is. It's going to count at 100. Well, it's 100% of that category, but it's going to count now as 12% of their entire grade. 600 maximum points for the final exam, but 12% of their grade. Okay. Let me quickly move the quizzes into their categories. It's weighting them now. And there I go. I've now taken a grade book that had only points. I've created categories based on a grading scheme breakdown of percentages. I've placed all my graded assignments into those categories. It all adds up to 100%. And now the gradebook's just going to do the math for you as you go forward and as you score. Okay. All right. Are there any questions?
Hey, Chad, yeah, we do have a question.
Okay.
And so Christine Jacoy has asked, I have a question about having grading category of project 30%. Then you want the interim assignments that they're working on, like a project proposal, annotated bibliography, and so on and so forth, to be counted. What is the best way to do that? And she says she is giving points for each submission. So the grading scheme is like 5% of each one. Yes, so Christine, you want to go ahead, and if you need to elaborate on that question, feel free to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Good. So I tend to have projects and then I want them to work on it over the course of the semester. So the project, I want them to do a proposal earlier in the semester. I would give points to that. I'd have them do a bibliography. I'd have them do a draft and then the final report. I want the final report to be worth more than the other parts of the whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So my question is, do I do my initial grading scheme where I say project 30% and then give different weighting with it, like then the proposal's worth, 2% of the 30, 5% for the bibliography, like that?
You can manually do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Or is it better if I separate out in my grading scheme, each of those. And basically, instead of having a project category that's weighted, basically just weight each one, like the proposal's worth 5, whatever percent of the total, the bibliography, the draft, and the final, all separate.
I would think when you got, let me go to my grade. I'm going to set up, we'll go to the category setup here. I think you're making a good case for actually having a manually assigned weight to items in a category.
Okay.
I think that would work for you because you can create a category for your project, for the final project. You can have all your items grouped into that category, but you can manually assign weights to those if you want. I always choose evenly distribute because I usually don't have that type of scheme. I don't grade that way, but you can choose this manually and distribute it across there. Another thing that you can do is what I do with projects like that is I have the project, the final submission be a separate item, and then have all the different parts of the project as they're doing it through the course and in their own category. Now you can either manually distribute those weights or you can evenly distribute them however you want. Or you can do what you said, you can create categories for each one if you want. Either way will work. I think the most elegant solution, I think, is doing what you want to do, which is put all of your projects into one category and manually assign those weights. They just have to add up to 100%. Does that make sense?
Sorry,
so you have options.
Yeah. So I think what I heard you say is I could actually have in my grading scheme final project and then have interim components as its own.
That's what I would do.
Okay.
That if I had a project where they were doing iterated parts of that project all the way up to like a final submission, I would set the final submission as its own separate weighted item, and then I would put all the other ones into a separate project iteration category or project progress or whatever. And then I would distribute those across. Now it sounds like you want to give them 5% for the outline, but 25% for an annotated outline or something like that.
Not necessarily. Then, I actually like your solution better.
So that's a really elegant solution because then you only have two categories. You have your final submission in one category. You have all the other items in another category, and then you can keep adding items to that if you want.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Absolutely. Okay, who's next? Lots of questions in the chat.
Yep, got a few questions here.
Okay.
So after that is Professor Annette Haywood Carter. She wants each of her assignments to be weighted differently. Do I also use a manual? So
yeah.
Sir Haywood Carter, let us know if that was already answered before. If you need to, feel free to unmute if you want to elaborate more.
Yes, it's basically you just answered the question that you can go in there and weight them the way you would want to. And the person who just asked about projects, I have a system that sort of defeats me, and I wind up kind of just figuring it out, spending days trying to figure it out at the end of the semester, because I allow students to revise their work. I'm wondering how to incorporate this into the system. So a student can always go back and revise their work for a better grade. And the reason for that is because after the critiques, they often have these kind of big aha moments, and you want them to actually apply it, right?
It's the best way to teach writing.
Yeah, I teach film directing, and it's very similar, I think, to writing. So and then in the end, I also offer opportunities for bonuses, like, because a lot of times a student will learn something this wasn't what I was necessarily teaching, and it's tremendously valuable. So I guess the question is, in terms of flexibility, you just kind of keep going back in and adding stuff, or in the end, if you want to give 5 points for a bonus, how do you do that? I don't think
that
I'm
you
being
can
very
always
articulate.
You can always do that manually. What you do is when you're setting up your grading items, there's a checkbox that allows you to go above the maximum total. And if you have that checked, you can always add additional scores after that. There was a question that came out in chat that's similar to yours, and how do you add bonus points? You can set up assignments. I'm not covering that in this webinar because it's a little bit more of an advanced grading feature. I try to keep it simple because I don't like to do math. I don't usually give bonus points or anything like that. I like to keep things simple, but that is, the system does allow you to do that. So you can do that manually, or you can set up assignments so that you can actually give them, a few extra points on that assignment manually if you want to. You can also set up a Dropbox assignments as bonus assignments so that they're not figured into, they're just added on to the total at the end.
Okay,
Does that answer
and
your
just
question?
going, yes, and also just what I've been doing in the past is going back and changing a grade. If someone revises it, I just go back in and change
Yeah,
it. Anything wrong with that approach?
No, that's up to you as a teacher.
Right,
No,
okay.
that's a,
I like keeping a record. The one thing about that I
Yeah.
don't like is I love for the student to be able to see that first time they did it, it was a C, and the second time it was a B plus. I love having all that
Oh, yeah.
there. So
way-
that's another question.
the way I do that for my students, I've taught writing courses, and I do that in my communication courses too. I allow them to do revisions of their papers. So I have two separate assignments. I have a rough draft and a final. Simple as that. I just, I within an assignments category, I create, rough draft, and then I have them do peer review and discussion. And then they can turn in their final draft at the end. So it really is a good way to teach those kind of iterative types of writing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Now, in terms of, it sounds like you might have a fairly, detailed grade book. If you want any help kind of simplifying that, let us know. We can do an individual session with you. That's what we're here for, and we can help you clean up that grade book.
Thank you. I get really tangled up with grading.
Yeah,
and I've
yeah.
been teaching a long time, and I have not gotten
Me
myself
too.
out of this knot. So thank you very much for that offer.
Every instructor does. You're not alone. And it's a little bit beyond the scope of just this little hour webinar. It might take a little longer just to fix your grade book, but it can be done, and we can do that on an individual basis. No problem. That's what we're here for. That's what ACS does.
Thank you.
So Chad, next question is Aaron's.
Yep.
Aaron, I don't know if you'd like to unmute or not, or I can go ahead and read your question.
Yeah, it's I lose track of the questions in chat, so you might have to repeat it for me.
That's okay. I'm here. Hi, Chad. It's Aaron.
Yeah,
Hi.
Aaron. You showed
Yeah.
up. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I did. Well, sorry I'm late, but I always have the same issue. I love weighted grades for those of you who haven't done it because it cuts back on the groveling for points. However,
Exactly.
it's the same issue about when they look in the grade book and you have different assignments weighted and they want to know where their standing is, and yet they see this incomplete score of like saying 66% because things aren't filled in. So they don't really know exactly like mid-semester if they're getting a B, if they're doing, because they're not understanding that weighted piece. So is there something that can be done that shows them that they are, like, based on what the points have been collected so far, where their standing is? There is. Okay.
Always, first of all, you may have come in after I showed this.
Yeah, I did.
Always, when you do into grade calculations in your gradebook settings, always choose drop ungraded items, because then it won't score things as 0 that haven't been turned in. And then students could see a running total. So say you gave one student maybe an extra week to do an assignment, and all the other students have turned it in and gotten their score. That student would have a 0, and then their average would go way down. But if you always drop ungraded items,
And so
then
that
they
is
have a running total. Yeah.
so that's set up when you set up the system. So I just have been transferring my system over, and I might need to reset it up then from the
Could be, and I can help you do that.
Okay.
We
All
have
right.
a meeting coming up, so I can help you do that. I can help you with that.
I probably
Yeah.
start from scratch and do that. Okay, that answers
Yeah.
the question. Drop the items and I'll start over. Okay, thanks, Chad.
Sure. And I just wanted to show you, this is from, what the students see when you have a weighted grade book. You will see, the students will see their raw scores, and sometimes they'll see this discrepancy. because they'll see like, maybe for this assignment, they got an 80 and it'll say 80%. But for this assignment, they got a 150 and it'll say, 90%. And, you just got to let them know at the beginning that you're doing this and what it looks like in their grade book. And that they can always, their weighted score will always show up. I don't think I have my final calculated column visible for students yet. I have to do that. But anyway, for their final score, they will always be able to see that running total and see how they're doing. That cuts down on the emails. The panicky emails. How am I doing? I need an A. How can you, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. I got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. Who's next?
So the next question is from S. Cleary. Would you like to state your question, or I can read it for you?
I'm sorry. I couldn't do this without Jennifer reading these for me.
So my question is basically that whenever I do the weighted system and I have the final calculated grades released, my students will tell me that they can't actually see the final calculated grade in their grade book. Is there a way to actually make that appear that I'm not seeing or that I'm missing?
I would have to look at your gradebook to see what's going on. There's two reasons for that. One might be that you haven't released that final score yet, and that you would do that in the gradebook. But you say that you have released it. It could be invisible. So if I'll show you what that might look like. Where would I see that? Where could I demonstrate that? So for each one of these grading items,
You're not sharing, Chad.
oh, I'm sorry. So I'm in my grade book, and I've let me back up and go again. So here's my grade book. If I go into an individual grading item, I can make it visible to students. So you might want to check that. I can hide this from users, and then it'll show like this little eye here. So check to see if this is next to your final exam score or next to any of your scores. I would have to see your grade book to look, but you may have it hidden. It's one of those hidden checkbox issues. Why students can't see that. That's really the only way students wouldn't see that is if you haven't, first of all, if you haven't published them from the grade book, or if somehow you've made that particular assignment invisible. Do you know if you've done either of those things?
I'm more talking about the actual final calculated grade for the entire class, not individual grades, but like their total calculated grade. And one of the options in the wizard is to release final calculated grade. And I have that.
And you have that?
And it never seems to pop up until it's like actually time to calculate grades. And then I have to do like the whole bunch of checkboxes for each of the students to actually release final grade. But that's at the end of the semester.
It's a setting somewhere, and I'd have to go in and look at your course. I can't tell just by your description what's going on. But
okay. Oh well.
If you come to our virtual support room, we can figure it out for you, or you can email me or Jennifer, and we can figure that out for you one-on-one to see what's going on.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, but obviously something's wrong, and I'm sure it's like a hidden checkbox somewhere, a setting that we just need to tweak.
Sure. Okay.
For them to be able to see that, because they should be able to see it.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I want. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, it's just it's hard for me to troubleshoot individual courses right now in this webinar, but it's much easier for us to do that on a one-on-one basis or in virtual support, which is open 9 to 5 every weekday. I don't know if a lot of you have used that, but I don't know of any other university that has that available to instructors, and it is so cool. I like working in there because you can do these little troubleshooting things with instructors. What's going on with your grade book? Let's check it out. So I definitely recommend you using that. Maybe Jennifer, you can find a link to our virtual support room. I don't know.
Excuse me, Chad.
Yeah.
My name is Asiye, and actually, I believe I know what the other caller's problem is.
Oh,
To
good.
the final grade, if you actually click on enter grades, there's an option next there that if you, I don't know, if you go back to your grade book and if you click on enter grades for everyone, then next, can you share your screen? I can explain on your grade book.
Want me to share mine, or
Yes, yours, I mean.
because I think she might have real students in hers, and we don't want to do that. So let me share mine.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to show, because I know, I was helping a faculty with this issue.
Oh, good.
So if you click on, I believe it's more actions, if you click
I'd show
on,
columns.
no, it's, okay, I need to actually use mine, but, so you click on enter grades, and there is actually, if you click on, so, okay, I can see that as that option in here. Oh, final adjusted, or final calculate grade. No, there should be under more. Because there is
These have,
actually
if you notice, these have, these are also invisible.
release the final
So I'm
grade.
having the same issue in this course.
Okay, let me take a look at mine, and then I can go back to, because there is actually one that it says release the.
Yeah, and if as you can see, I have that setting on for my dev course too. It's students wouldn't be able to see these because you see these the eyes crossed out. here.
Chad,
Yeah.
go ahead and go back to go to your settings in the upper right hand corner here. And go to, I think it's, let me see, scroll down. It's probably the next tab over. Go ahead and scroll back up. Scroll down. I forget which one it is.
Display how final grade was calculated. No, that's not it.
Calculation options. Try that one.
So now I'm curious.
Scroll back up.
It's not there either.
If you go back to your grade book,
Yeah.
go back to your grade book, and if you go scroll down in here to when it says final calculated grade, click on that one. No, I just added. I know that there is one place that you can actually make it visible. It's funny that I can't see it here, but.
Well, I can't either, and we're supposed to be the experts, so.
Yeah, I've done this, and I know that I always release the final grade for all students, because if you don't release it, they won't be able to actually.
And they can't see the running total. Exactly. You want that. I want them to see that from the very beginning. Because that's the whole point of having weighted grades, is they can see that calculated total throughout the entire course.
Getting rid of integrades.
Mhm.
And then go to, I think it's, if you go to the final calculate grade, the drop down arrow there.
Edit here.
Yes.
Can exceed.
No, actually cancel. And then you want to go, I think it's enter grades actually. So once you go to your final calculated grade,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and hit that drop down arrow again. And go to enter grades. You want to select all to release.
Release.
Ah,
That's it. Yeah.
why do they do it that way?
Release.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know why they do it that way. Go ahead and save and close. And then now.
You know why? I think it's because D2L was originally designed for K through 12 education.
Probably.
Like a lot, like Canvas was too. And so they still retain features for kids under 18. I think that must be the explanation. Even we have trouble finding these sometimes. But there's your answer. So thank you so much for solving that issue Professor?
Thanks, Jennifer. I think Jennifer was the one who solved it.
I think, yeah, well, all of us together. This is what happens in virtual support sometimes too, because it's amazing how professors can come in and completely stump us because we're just, I've never seen that before. And so we have to we have a chat open and we're chatting with each other, trying to figure things out. It's kind of fun. That's what's fun about it. Anyway, let's go to your more questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Professor Farahani?
Yes. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, yeah. Do you have your hand raised? Did you have a question?
Oh, no. I raised, I'm sorry. I got the.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, you have to turn off that hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, any other questions in chat that we didn't get to? There's a lot in chat. Oh yeah, this is people trying to figure out. Okay.
So someone had asked us, can you show us to check how students view their calculated grades? So they'd like to see that view.
Now that I've made that visible, let me show you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my sample gradebook that I had set up with the weighted categories. So if I go to student view, go to grades. The weighted total still doesn't show.
That's because you changed your status to student view, correct?
Yep.
That's
But
why.
the students should be able to see.
You'd have
that
to.
calculated
You would
total.
have to impersonate one of your students that are actually enrolled as students. You're not going to see any scores for you.
Got it. Because viewing as student is not really viewing as student.
Right.
We've found out the hard way many times. Okay, so let me go in.
Yeah, so just to clarify what Chad just did. So you as instructors have the option to view a student perspective.
Mhm.
However, you wouldn't be able to see a student's grade unless they're in the room with you and willing to open up their account and see it. This option to impersonate a student and actually see that scores is something we have access to with our privileges and our positions. So if you ever need that, that's something you'd want to contact us about either through virtual support or through a one-on-one consultation with instructional designer. That's just because of, FERPA laws and all that kind of good stuff. So what we're showing you is something that would actually be from a student perspective now. But as you, an instructor, will never be able to see a score usually show up. Is this one that it did Christina or Crystal actually have scores in her assignment?
No, she doesn't have scores, but you can see where the final calculated shows up right here.
Oh, she had one at the bottom, I think.
Did she?
Oh, never mind. I missed it maybe. Oh, it's 1/1, I think is what it was that I saw.
Yeah, I may not have released that. Yeah, that's where they would see this. So they would see a percentage and their weight right there. What I should do is assign some scores to see what happens. But let me make sure that there aren't any other questions first. Any other questions that we haven't gotten to?
Yes, actually. So one other thing is with hiding a category. So if you could go ahead and share your screen again.
Mm-hmm.
Someone wanted to verify like what that would look like, to ensuring that if you hide a category, they wouldn't be able to see anything. So I think it was instructor.
Maybe you can do that.
Yeah, trying to do it actually for the assignments because that actually has a bunch of items in there.
Got it. Restrictions tab is usually where
Actually,
the hiding is. No? Hide from users?
You can do it that way, but go ahead and
Mhm.
cancel and I'll show you the quick hand.
Okay.
There shouldn't. Go ahead and hit the drop down arrow. Hide from users.
Hide from users. Duh. There you go. And then you see that eye. It shows you that students can't see it. And then if I go to, I might as well go personally. I'll be Crystal for a minute. Crystal is another one of our illustrious instructional designers. And there it's hidden. They don't see it. Does that answer your question? Good. Okay. I want to try something here. Where's Crystal? Lab Sim. Oh, I can't enter grades here.
You have to click the drop down arrow for that category and then enter grades.
Yeah, Canvas allows you to do that right in the grade book.
We're making you practice with all different kinds of LMSs, Chad.
I know. I teach at 2 other universities. So sometimes I'm going from Blackboard to D2L to Canvas all in one day. 2 grades. And they're all different. Okay, let's see what this looks like. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want to impersonate.
Okay, and Chad, while you're doing that, just so everyone knows, for the survey, we've gone ahead and posted it in the chat. So if you'd like to go ahead and do that now, and you'll be able to see it. Uh-oh, it's showing it's expired. Hold on.
There we go. So if you notice, what I did there was I added a couple of scores for a student. And now they can see, you know, basically what their total grade is at that point after those 2 assignments. That's really powerful for students to be able to see. That's one of the main reasons that I use weighted scoring in an LMS, because even if I figured out, I did weighted scoring in my own Excel sheets before, but you still had to communicate that to students somehow. But with the LMS, they can log in 24/7 and see that, which I like. All right. Any other questions?
I just added one that's kind of elementary.
Sure.
So let's say I have a discussion board going, and I want to give, every time someone participates, I want to give them 1 point, right? But then I go back and I look over the discussion and someone hasn't actually participated. They've just faked it for the point. They just put blah, 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 literally. Can I manually like change that 1 to a 0?
Sure.
Do I have that kind of flexibility?
Yeah, but a discussion grade is just 1 grade. What do you use a rubric?
I do-ish, and yeah, I mean, it's really one of those things where, for the most part, I don't really judge the quality of their discussion. But every now and then you have a student who sort of is gaming the system.
Just blows it
So
off,
it's
yeah.
like, how do you go in and just like, can you just manually change their grade along the way?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, you can manually change any score that you want as the instructor. The way I usually do discussions is I grade it on a rubric. I usually grade it on like a 3 or 4 item rubric. 1 is for their initial response. 1 is so they'll get like 40% for their initial response, 20% for at least 2 follow-up responses, and then grammar. And I have a rubric set up that way.
That's
So they
excellent.
might turn in
Yeah.
their initial response, but then blow off the peer responses, right? So
Okay.
they just don't get a score for those on the rubric.
I
That
see.
to me is the easiest way to score.
So you can set it up so it's tracking their initial response, and then follow-ups can be to peers' comments, not just in the mainstream, but it can be
Exactly.
on a
Right.
vector. Okay.
When you go to grade a discussion, you'll see their initial post versus their responses to other students. So you'll
Mhm.
see like you'll click on a student and you'll see like, oh, they've done 5, and it's pretty easy to see their initial response versus their response to other students.
A lot of times the response to other students is yay, or I love it. And so it's
That's nice and
there.
very supportive, but I'll
Yeah.
give them a 3 out of 4 for that. I'm like, very supportive. Maybe add some points from the course or something like that, and you'll get you'll get full score for that. That's usually what I do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay,
you
well,
so
we're about a minute past the hour, so anyone can go. I can stay to ask questions. I'm free to ask questions if you need me. I don't want to take up Jennifer's time if she needs to go. Couldn't do it without you, Jennifer. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And then also the correct link for the survey is up there and available in the chat.
Oh, yes.
So please feel free to grab that one. It's the latest link that I just posted. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, and that is only open for the next hour. So try to do that. And you can just answer the minimum questions to get your credit for the course. All right. Thank you all very much for coming. Questions are awesome. I even learned something.
I have one question
Sure.
about grading in groups. Let's say I have a group activity and I've put people in groups in, Zoom in the breakout rooms. And
Mhm.
I know it doesn't sync with the grade book, but
Yeah.
let's say I want to grade each group. How would I go about doing that? I
You'd
mean,
put them into groups in the LMS. So you'd create groups in the LMS itself.
Hey,
okay,
Francine.
'Cause
hello.
there's no connection between a Zoom breakout room or a Zoom group versus an LMS group. You have to make that connection yourself.
Okay,
manually.
Yeah,
so
Francine.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so once you have them in groups, I want to give them one grade for each, for all the people. They would all get the same grade.
When you set up groups in Beachboard,
Yeah.
and I can show you this if you come to VS, or if you email me or something, I can show you this really quickly, and so can
Okay.
Jennifer. But when you set up groups, you have the options to have group members all share the same score, or you can score them individually. You have those different options for that.
Okay, didn't know that. All right. So they don't have to all get the same score,
No,
or they do?
no,
Okay, great.
they don't have to. No.
All right, I'll just come in and do a Zoom thing.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. The group function in Beachboard is really powerful. It's really good, but it takes a few minutes to go through, depending on how you're trying to use it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I want to do that. All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.